Let hell break out. All hell's going to break out if all hostages are not returned by Saturday at noon. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think anybody seriously thinks on the Israeli side that Hamas is about to release all the hostages by Saturday, which would essentially be well beyond what was agreed in the ceasefire deal. And this is Trump being Trump and talking off the cuff. That said, his remarks do put a lot of pressure on both sides of the process here. Pressure on Hamas to presumably stick to the deal and release the 3 hostages that it is supposed to release on Saturday. And pressure on Israel that if Hamas doesn't do that, it's going to be much politically harder for Netanyahu to not immediately return to the war.
And I mean, Trump is changing the deal. That's a fundamentally important point. As I was listening to that, I was thinking that the deal is very clear about the order in which the hostages come back. And it's not all by Saturday. There's a stage 1, there's a stage 2, which involves even the bodies of hostages coming back at some point. That's already been agreed, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And of course, I guess what Trump is trying to say is once you enter the game of changing the deal, then both sides can play it. Although, of course, the US is supposed to be one of the mediators of this deal and not one of the parties. But honestly, this whole ceasefire is currently in question. The negotiations for stage 2 of the ceasefire were supposed to begin nearly a week ago now, and they really haven't. And one of the major reasons for that is this kind of bombshell of the Trump plan. The idea that after the ceasefire and after all the hostages are released, every single Palestinian will be expelled from Gaza. Trump has now said he will personally buy Gaza and turn it into a holiday resort. So there is this question here that both sides are hearing, which is what have we got to negotiate about at this point? If at the end of the day, Trump's going to come and take it all anyway.
But outside of what Trump has said and done, Hamas has said Israel has broken the terms of the ceasefire. What have they said Israel has done, and what does Israel say in return?
So they've listed a kind of list of things, some of which happened quite a long time ago. This isn't today Israel did this one thing that was beyond the pale. It was, in the first week they did this in the way that we didn't like, and they didn't do this quite on time. It's kind of an odd list. And there's nothing you can really point to, which is, this was the major violation. It really does seem like more of an excuse on the Hamas side than some particular issue that they want resolved.
And the excuse would be because what, do you think? Because they don't want to give the hostages back, or they're concerned about how Trump has loaded the dice in favour of Israel and wants to do things to Gaza at the end of it? They now think that this ceasefire is a road to a place they don't want to go to?
I think there's a few different factors here. One is, look, we saw the last release of hostages, and they were in a terrible condition, starving, who'd be completely isolated. And it seems like Hamas has been releasing the hostages, best condition first. So the next lot are probably, I hate to say it, in a worse state than this lot. And they don't really want the bad PR. If they can hold on to these people and never let them go, they'd rather that than people see what they've done to them. So I think that's one factor here. Another is, yes, there is the sense on the Hamas side, which is, what are we getting out of this? If in the end, whether the Trump plan happens or not, if in the end there's kind of a green light to Israel to go back to the conflict, then what have we got out of this? So I think that there's kind of twin factors on this. One, a sense that they're not going to get what they want in the end, and two, that if they're not going to get what they want in the end, do they really want to expose what they've done to the world?
Does the West Bank play into this at all? That ultimately, again, with the belligerence of Trump and Trump's sort of support of Israel, the idea of the settlements in the West Bank increasing, does that factor into to what happens in Gaza, do you think?
Not as much as you might think. Hamas is still active in the West Bank, is still carrying out terror attacks in the West Bank, and in fact, Israel is carrying out a pretty major operation to clamp down on Hamas and other groups in the West Bank right now, with the kind of tacit approval of the Palestinian Authority, who are complaining loudly, but also arresting journalists who report on it. Hamas mostly is focused right now on surviving as the government of Gaza. If it can harness the will of the Palestinians in the West Bank to make itself more popular, it will do so. But it's really kind of focused on its survival and its ability to kind of keep Gaza after what it did on October the 7th, and increasingly now with Donald Trump pushing in a different direction.
And just finally, if this ceasefire comes to an end in the way that Trump's talking about, the Gazans have all returned en masse to Gaza. We've seen all the pictures of the return. Is it plausible? Is it in Benjamin Netanyahu's interest? Is it in the interest of Israel for them to start dropping bombs on people who've just returned to their homes?
I don't know. I think we will. I suspect that a return to fighting Hamas will not look exactly like it has until now. It might be more focused on targeted strikes or Hamas leaders, pinpoint incursions, rather than trying to move all the people that had already moved. The other alternative is they could say, well, now we've cleaned out the north, we can go into the south and go into some of those cities in southern Gaza that were less destroyed, expecting people to move north. Nobody quite knows what it looks like. I think some in Israel are hoping that Donald Trump will actually succeed in opening the borders and all the Gazans will run away, and that's probably a fantasy. One of the reasons why we ended up in this ceasefire is because Hamas was under pressure, but another was that the Israeli military was kind of finding it hard to find things to do. They'd run out of targets. That said, in these last few weeks, as Hamas has come back above ground and shown its face again, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a new trove of intelligence, and there may well be new targets that can hit Hamas people and hopefully keep civilians safe. But I don't know. We'll have to see.
And does Saturday at 12 o'clock feel like the next key deadline?
I don't think it's a real deadline. I do think the end of the day Saturday will be a deadline. I think if Hamas doesn't release hostages over the course of Saturday, then I think we have a problem. They might try and push it to Sunday, but certainly if we get to the middle of Sunday and there hasn't been a release, then I think we're seeing the collapse of the ceasefire. Yes.
It's all very chastening stuff. Good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us. That's Arieh Kovler there, journalist in Jerusalem, going through it all, Kate. And we do talk about Trump, the disruptor, and it's extraordinary what he said there, because it's not the deal that's on the table. He clearly doesn't think the deal on the table is the correct deal. He's supposed to be a neutral-ish mediator in that deal, but he's clearly a partisan on one side. How does this very fragile and maybe pointless peace anyway survive?
I thought it was really interesting that Trump himself said all hell will break loose, but then he said, well, if Israel wants to overrule me, they have the power. They can basically ignore what I've said. And I take that to mean that he recognises his comments are going to go way beyond what Benjamin Netanyahu would say himself publicly. I mean, he's trying to completely change the terms of this deal, and that will never be acceptable. And actually the polling in Israel suggests that there is a huge amount of support for the ceasefire to continue. So I think it's quite difficult territory actually here going forward. But you're right. I mean, once again, he's thrown some words out overnight which are almost redefining the debate in the morning.
Yeah, we're going to do this every day. We're going to do it every day till he stops doing it. And I remember Hugo saying to us that when we were handing over to him, I think a couple of days ago, Kay, he said, look, at some point, either what he says has meaning, in which case you have to listen more intently, or it gets to the point where what he says doesn't seem to have a real world impact anymore, in which case you maybe change your view on him. But for the first, 3 or 4 months, then you've got to believe what he says now,
yeah.
and then test out whether it actually has any real world impact.
Yeah, and I think we may be reaching that place with this particular topic, and it will be for the actors in the region to really take forward what happens next.